So the closer government is to the people, the more efficient it is and the more responsive it's going to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely excited about my next two guests. They are two of America's economic dynamic duos. They are the Rankin family. They are Dr. David Rankin and his daughter, Dr. Beth-Ann Rankin Baker.
It's sometimes because they just don't understand it fully and understand that though it has flaws, it is certainly one of the greatest mobilizers of the human spirit throughout recorded history of mankind.
A little bit about Dr. Rankin. He is a multiple times author. He's a thought leader. He is the interim president at Southern Arkansas University and the Emeritus president of Southern Arkansas University. It's not common that I get a chance to sit down with two of America's economic dynamic duo and to sit down with father and daughter.
Unity is even embedded in our name as a country. We are the United States of America, and yet we celebrate the differences even between 50 different states. I mean, even in the DNA of how we are designed as a national entity, there is unity but strength in uniqueness.
And I'm telling you, the interview was so in-depth. The interview was rich. The interview was enlightening. It's one that you do not want to miss.
Every segment of society, all individuals, the goal is for everybody to be free and have equality of opportunity.
In his book, he talks about the rule of order as it is the key to family, organization, community, state, and country economic stabilization and advancement, and has the power to help you to discover what your personal freedom is from an economic standpoint.
If you're free, it's almost like an invisible hand that guides you to do things that make sense in your self-interest, but it's also in the interest of the nation.
Dr. David Rankin is a thought leader. He's the professor of economics, is a certified financial analyst, and he has served as advisor for 4 Arkansas governors and is the chairperson of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisor for the past 27 years. His skill set, his tool set, his knowledge base is unmatched. Dr. Beth-Ann Rankin Baker. She is the co-author of the book Economics of Freedom, and she is the former advisor for the governor, Mike Huckabee, and has served as executive director and Arkansas 529 Savings Plan, and have served on the Board of Education for the state of Arkansas. I am absolutely excited to reunite with my fellow mule riders at Southern Arkansas University. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the one and only, the Rankins economics, the dynamic duo of economics, the Rankins.
It's the moment you've been waiting for. It's a conversation that must be had today and not tomorrow. Welcome to another episode of I'm Listening, I'm Ready with your host, Andrew E. Guy. Let's talk about it.
I am excited to be joined by these two individuals. They're like family to me. I went to Southern Arkansas University. Well, we'll talk about that as we get into this interview, but it's almost like a reunion of families. So I am joined by Doctors Rankin, Beth-Ann Rankin, and Dr. David Rankin, current president of Southern Arkansas University. If you're looking for a great university, I'm going to plug it anyway. Get down there to Magnolia, Arkansas, where the leadership is amazing and the atmosphere, especially for the international students, make you feel like home away from home. Listen, Dr. Rankin, I just want you to start off by just telling the people a little bit about you and what you do and where you hail from.
Well, I'll tell you, actually born in Tennessee, but I spent most of my growing up days in Arkansas and had a special interest in this part of the world and this university. But economics and finance, that's my major field. And I spent many years teaching, as you well know, and you were president of the International Students Association down here, a great leader on campus. And I just loved working with the students. And it's been a great experience. I had a couple of college professors change my life. and steer me toward higher education. And it has been a wonderful opportunity. Never planned to be a president or a business dean. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to be a college professor, and I wanted to live on the farm. We do live on the farm about 4 miles from the campus here. And so I got to do all those. So I never planned to do this other stuff. But it's been a blessing of major proportions, Andrew. And it was great to have you here on campus. Again, you are a great leader.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. More about that coming soon. Beth-Ann, listen, talk to us. Tell the people who you are. I am just blessed that you're on the show today, and I'm looking for many more interviews, but this is amazing. Tell them a little bit about what you do.
It's so much fun, and it's a great honor to be here with Dad too. Andrew, this has been such a fun father-daughter collaboration that we've done on his second book, his second book, The Economics of Freedom. But it's just been fun. Dad mentioned that he'd always prayed for a family. He got 3 redheaded kids, and we are all still involved and active in his life. So I'm sure sometimes he might appreciate a little vacation from all of his kids, but we love collaborating with him and working with him on projects. And this one has been particularly fun. And it's such a joy to get to see you again and be on your show and celebrate all the things that you've done. I love just the whole concept of I'm listening and I'm ready. And it really, I think about how that even ties into this book that we've written, and the, sort of an approach that we could take with that too, of being all ears and listening and being ready. And I love that whole theme of how you tie all that together. So, but Dad and I've really enjoyed working on this project.
Awesome. Now, there are so many nuggets to take away from this book. Well, first of all, I want to let the audience know, if you haven't gotten a copy, this is the first book right here. It says here, this stuff is important. I'm going to start right there. This stuff is important. The moment you think something is not important to you, you're going to miss the nuggets that can transform your life. So it says what every American needs to know about economics. This is the first book. But what I want to focus on today is the economics of freedom. The economics of freedom. Why that title? Dr. Rankin?
I think what's happening today is so many decisions that are made particularly at the national level, at the federal level, involve economic policy. And yet they seem reasonable. Okay, we want everybody in the United States to do this. We want the wages to be this. We want the economic behavior to be this. So we'll just pass a law, or we'll sign an executive order in the White House, and we'll do this for everyone. And it's really important to understand that these policies affect our freedom. They have an impact on our freedom. I was just thinking about the electric vehicle situation. That's certainly economic policy, but it affects everyone in the country. And we didn't move from buggy whips to automobiles because of a government edict or executive order. We moved there because it made common sense. That was just what needed to happen. And there will be a movement from gasoline automobiles to electric automobiles, but the marketplace needs to take care of that. If the marketplace takes care of it, you and I have the freedom. We can say, yes, we do want that. No, we don't want that. But if the government does it, that takes away some of the freedom from us to make our own decisions. So that's the way an economic policy can impact freedom. And we want to be sure that government doesn't exceed its authority in making these determinations, and that we maintain our freedom.
Now, do you think that freedom is actually still available? I'm talking from a mental health perspective, right? And from an economic perspective, and from a personal choice perspective. Do you think we really realize that we have control over our own freedom? I mean, in America, in Canada, or even globally, do you think this personal freedom is taken for granted at times?
I think it is taken for granted. And I will say this, central government has grown so big, not just in the United States, but all over the world, that we tend to look to central government to solve all our problems. And we tend to look to them to solve problems we ought to be solving ourselves, or our communities ought to be solving, or our states ought to be solving. That's why the United States has become such a powerful nation, is because each of the states is different. they're all sovereign under the Constitution. So there are certain things that the federal government really constitutionally cannot tell the states what to do. The 10th Amendment says, look, if the Constitution did not give the federal government a certain power, they don't have it. It belongs to the states. And then the governors are sovereign. That's why the policies in California and policies in Arkansas can be different. And then people can decide, do I want to live in California? Do I want to live in Arkansas? And here in Arkansas, we have a very pro-business environment. We are very oriented toward freedom. And California has unfortunately restricted the freedom of its citizens in many, many ways. So, but let people make their own choices. Let all these states be different, rather than, as you talked about, one size fits all.
You know, Dr. Rankin, this is getting really juicy right here. Really, really juicy right here. But I really want to get, Beth-Ann, talk to me a little bit about when he said that there's a choice. You can live wherever you want to live. And then he talked about the federal decisions that can be made, and each state can be separate. So they don't all have to be on one accord. Can you chime in and let me know, how does the federal decision impact the state decision, and how that impacts the individual decision from a freedom point of view?
Well, gratefully, this is something that I got introduced to in the administration of Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee years and years ago, when I served in the governor's office. In Little Rock, I was the policy advisor and the director for state and federal affairs. And it was an eye-opening experience to realize every day, as we worked on all issues, everything from education issues, workforce issues, natural resources issues, that this really tied in with who has what power. And how much power do they have over other entities or over other individuals? Because it really was, I was in the Arkansas governor's office, so we were advocating for the state of Arkansas. We wanted to be able to make our own decisions and shape and form our own policy. So it really was this interesting dialogue between state and federal. Then you bring that, Andrew, even home a little more locally, you bring it home to the state. You also have that dynamic conversation going on between the state and local entities. So you have your counties and you have your cities and you have your townships and your jurisdictions throughout the state. And then comprising all that, you have the families and neighborhoods and communities and civic leaders, that are a part of those entities as well. So you see freedom engaging and operating at every single one of those levels, but you also see the economic policy that is impacting those freedoms at every single level. But that's, as Dad spoke to, and in this new book, The Economics of Freedom, that's exactly what he points out as those dynamic conversations and decisions that impact human behavior. And Dad always pulls it back to that. Okay, what does this policy, it might sound great, it might sound wonderful and very utopian. He has an entire chapter on utopia and whether that's even possible. Sometimes we consider that our economic policy is trying to create some type of utopia as though that exists anywhere. But he also ties that directly to, but what will human behavior be once this policy is in place? And how does that impact freedom? How does that impact the Bill of Rights and the freedoms that we have as Americans?
Absolutely love it. I think I feel like a kid in a candy store right now. I have to tell you right now. I can't believe that I have the opportunity to sit down with such great minds. And if you're listening for the first time, this is Andrew E. Guy on the ILIRPODCAST. I'm listening, I'm ready. It is a podcast that's dedicated for those who are on the go. I am sitting, I am talking, I am having intellectual economic bread with two of the greatest minds that I've ever come to know. My president, I would say, because I went to Southern Arkansas University, and I have the opportunity to see this seasoned veteran just walk the campus, engage with our students. I have never, ever felt out of water, like a fish out of water, when I'm on the campus. As a matter of fact, I've always had a spot on his calendar every other month when I book to go and sit and talk to him about the things that are impacting our international students. So I want to just say thank you, Dr. Rankin, for not just being, but just modeling what true leadership is all about. I'm going to jump back to the book, and we're talking about the economics of freedom. Now, Beth-Ann, you talked a little bit about, policies. I maybe I'm not just the economic guy, but when I look at policies, I think of guidelines that helps people to shape the behavior of how they interact one to another, whether it be at a federal level, state level, or just municipal level. Now, how does policy help to strengthen the freedom of the internet, the individual? Dr. Rankin, I want to pose that question to you. How does policies help to strengthen the freedom of the individual?
Well, I think it's really this country and many other countries have benefited from capitalism. Let me read a little section here from my book. This is from the Dr. Lamont Zhao, who he was on our faculty for a number of years.
I remember him.
He came here from China. And so I interviewed him about what life was like in China when he was little. And he referred this to me. Quote, when I was little, we literally didn't have enough food. We had the central planning system. My parents worked hard for the commune. We had a team in our village. There were 12 teams. My parents worked hard, but we just didn't have enough food. In 1978, the communists started reforms and peasants started to own their own land. I could immediately see the difference. By 1981, my parents started to have enough food. We had our first house. So what happened was, after the death of Mao Zedong, the next administration came in and started creating some freedoms, really a move toward capitalism, which China has continued ever since, because they realized if we put people in charge of their own property, they're going to be more productive than if we have a commune. And so he told me, he said, it was a dramatic change in our standard of living because we introduced some concepts of capitalism. And of course, when you do that, you have more freedom. People have their own property. By the way, private property is very, very important. And I was thinking this morning about the squatters that are taking over people's houses. That's an assault on private property. And private property is one of the cornerstones of capitalism and free markets. And so when we start saying someone can come in and just set up camp in your house while you're on vacation, and we let them do that, that is such a negative for freedom because it attacks private property, which is so important.
When I think of freedom, Dr. Rankin, I think about all the struggles that the different race or cultures have been through. And I would be remiss if I didn't really kind of talk about how does this freedom to own and capitalism impact, let's say, people of color in the South. And one of the things that I, as a person coming from the Caribbean, from Jamaica, and then from Canada and down to Arkansas, one of the things that I have experienced is that there was a massive divide when I got there, even on campus, when I look at all the international students coming on campus. And so there was a division. And it hit me in a way where I said, guys, we are away from home. What can we do to make this home our home while we are here? And that was one of the number one reason for me running for president of the International Student Association. There was a divide, and I had a meeting. I've been having meetings in the library. I try to create workshops. I did like soccer on the weekends. And then we came together and we said, listen, guys, this is home right now. What can we do to make this home our best experience? And in doing so, we realized that we had more to offer than we are actually missing out on. And so to add to your point, when we talk about capitalism, we realize, and under your leadership, we realize that students now had the opportunity to get scholarships, to enhance their education, and to move on to greater educational achievement because of your leadership at Southern Arkansas University. So how does it tie into the economic of freedom? When we realize that our mental capacity is a tool to enhance and give us that economic freedom that we can have, it changes the whole game. It changes the playing field. It levels the playing field. Doesn't matter if you're international or American citizen. And so, Beth-Ann, I'm going to come to you with this. What are some of the things that you have learned or just gleaned from your dad, Dr. Rankin, as you work with him through this book? What was something that just actually just stick out to you as a daughter working underneath his tutelage and his years of knowledge?
Well, I'll even go back to when I was a college student. I majored in history and music and later in public administration and an education doctorate in organizational leadership. But I had dad's economics class as a student. And so he introduced me to Dr. Milton Friedman and Free to Choose and so many incredibly grounded principles of economics. And it taught me how to approach and think differently. And that's one thing in this book, The Economics of Freedom. He reintroduces all of that. But, you know, you were talking about individualism, Andrew, and yet how that could either divide or it can unify. And I would definitely articulate that unity is even embedded in our name as a country. We are the United States of America, and yet we celebrate the differences even between 50 different states. I mean, even in the DNA of how we are designed as a national entity, there is unity but strength in uniqueness. So you can still be unique but united. And so that is one of the things that I think is a banner that we carry as a country, but that we also can carry in our individual hearts, because the Bill of Rights, it secures those freedoms and protects those freedoms for individuals. And I think that this country then, because of that, helps create mobility to mobilize people out of their current circumstances and out of their current situation. And so to aspire to greater things and to have the freedom to be able to do that. When I was a college student, I also had a roommate from the former Soviet Union who grew up under the very rugged demands of socialism. And so I met up close and personable because socialism can sound wonderful. It can sound like a utopia, all things for all people at all times, under all circumstances, and everything is equal. It's not that way. And I had the opportunity to meet someone who grew up under that system. And it was very difficult. And so when I witnessed through her eyes coming to America and seeing, capitalism is not perfect, but it is one of the greatest mobilizers of humanity. And one of the things too that Dad touches on in the book is that it's about production. It's about human production. And what that does for you as you produce something of value, you're not just helping yourself, but you're helping others because you're creating something of value that will improve their life. And by improving their life through your good or service, then you are respectively improving your own and elevating your own personal circumstance. So you've got that connection between personal productivity. And that's one, Dad, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's one of those principles of capitalism that you outline in your book. And I say too, sometimes people can be critical of capitalism, but I would say in many cases, it's sometimes because they just don't understand it fully and understand that though it has flaws, it is certainly one of the greatest mobilizers of the human spirit throughout recorded history of mankind.
Absolutely love that input. Love it. I'm telling you, guys, I'm feasting right here. I'm feasting right here. I'm sitting at the feet of some of these great individuals. And Beth-Ann, I wanted to kind of extend this question also to Dr. Rankin here. We're both Dr. Rankins, by the way, Dr. David Rankin. And I wanted to extend this question. You said the Bill of Rights really protects the individual, and it actually mobilize them. My rendition of that would be mobilize them through human productivity, right? And in so doing, when we talk about the human productivity, where in there do we get to capitalize on that individual uniqueness? How does an individual uniqueness aid productivity that builds mobility, that brings unity? Dr. Rankins.
Well, the First Amendment to the Constitution talks a lot about freedom of speech and freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. And when people have freedom, then they're creative. I have friends who seem to me that they stay up half the night trying to figure out how to make their business better, how to figure out how to produce a a better product, how to produce a better service. And so capitalism harnesses all of that. And as you mentioned earlier, if you have to have equality of opportunity also. Every segment of society, all individuals, the goal is for everybody to be free and have equality of opportunity. Because if they have that, then they're going to, and we talk about the invisible hand of Adam Smith. He's considered the father of economics, certainly the father of capitalism. And he said, if you're free, it's almost like an invisible hand that guides you to do things that make sense in your self-interest, but it's also in the interest of the nation. So if someone makes a new product or provides a better service, it helps them, but it also helps the country. It helps your community. It helps your city. It helps your state. And so that's the power of capitalism, is it harnesses the creativity of the individual. Socialism tries to harness the creativity of government, which is by its nature not very creative.
And when we look at socialism not being creative, what is the downside other than crippling creativity from a socialist perspective? How does the individual, right, compared to a socialist nation, how does that empower the individual to harness their level of creativity? And what would be a first step in harnessing one individual's creativity? What would you say about that?
The first step to me is freedom, the freedom to choose your own occupation, the freedom to go into business, the freedom to not have so many rules and regulations that you say, there's just no way to break into that business because of all the rules and the regulations and the limitations. And I think that just for instance, in the book, it talks about that England, Great Britain, hired an individual to watch for Napoleon when he was active. And that person stayed on the payroll, or a variety of persons over the years stayed on the payroll for 124 years.
Wow.
And finally, after World War II, they discovered the individual was on the payroll and they canceled the job finally. And this is how government sometimes works. The intentions were good, but the efficiency was very, very low. The bigger government grows, the less efficient it is. And central government is the most inefficient. The states are much more efficient and the local government is much more efficient. Here in Arkansas, you can run into the governor at the state fair or at some event. You can run into your legislators just by going in downtown Magnolia and maybe run into your mayor. But the further we get away, then the less efficiency we have. And I think you can see that certainly in the United States in our federal government. You can see the waste, good intentions, a lot of good stuff is being done, but the waste and inefficiency is very high.
Okay. Now, I absolutely love that feedback there. Now, you talked about the size and efficiency. So the bigger, from an economic perspective, so the bigger the government or the bigger the ruling party, the less efficient. And you mentioned that you can run into the mayor or your local official at a state fair or something like that. How does that help the individual to connect with the state leader and or individuals who are in office that are guiding the country? How does meeting him at a fair helps that person to feel connected as part of the big picture of the economy?
Well, you get an opportunity to give them some input. Okay. Number one, they're more in the real world than, say, a president. And I think that you can see the mayor and say, Mayor, I got a big pothole right in the middle of my road coming through my neighborhood, and I sure would like to have it fixed. And others can do the same thing. And that is a direct input. And that individual is going to stop and listen to you because you're a voter. And I think the same thing goes with the governor, our state representatives. So the closer government is to the people, the more efficient it is and the more responsive it's going to be.
Okay, absolutely love that. I believe that proximity and over the years of graduating from Southern Arkansas University, I went on to teach for 10 years. And I've learned that proximity makes a difference in how our students respond. So if you have, let's say, a quote unquote troublemaker, and all you have to do is just kind of move closer to that desk and order is in place, right? But I also want to use proximity to talk about or ask this question: how does proximity empowers individual to have greater access to economic freedom? How does that work? from your perspective?
I think it does have an impact because government sometimes will enact laws or issue executive orders that are nonsensical. And when you really, an average citizen would say that doesn't make sense. At least your mayor and your governor and your state representative has got to then substantiate, well, let me tell you, Mr. Citizen or Ms. Citizen, here's why we did that. And if they have a good explanation, that's good. But so many times they don't. And then they have to give an account. So that's why I think that local government is more responsive. State government is more responsive. If you don't feel like you have much impact on the federal government, you really don't. Now, we can visit with our congressmen and our senators, but as you well know, it's hard to get a decision sometimes at the national level, whereas you can get one at the state and local level.
Okay.
Well, and I'll give you an example of that too. The state legislature here in Arkansas last year passed a law statewide that had good intentions, but it had some unintended consequences. And people have it's in some of the different fields and industries that they have here. And so what's great about this, though, is that it has activated people to show up at meetings, make phone calls, send emails, send letters. They've gotten involved. They've contacted their local state representatives, state senators. They've contacted individuals. So this year, during the upcoming fiscal session, they intend to fix and patch that legislation because, again, people had the freedom. They had the freedom to express without fear of repercussion or suppression or payback. They had the freedom to express their true feelings about that and to communicate to their elected officials the exact impact that this was having. And so we're going to most probably see some pretty positive change in state legislation because of people's involvement and because people weren't afraid to get involved. And I think that's also part of the beauty of our American political system here is that people do feel free to speak out, going back to the Bill of Rights, like Dad mentioned, and to make sure that you have economic policies in place that uphold that as well. But I think that also speaks to the relationship building between individuals and their elected officials. And also, I'll say this too, Andrew, as a former candidate for office, encouraging people to get engaged in the political system. You don't always have to get to know your elected official if you become one yourself and get out and campaign and run. And again, living in a country where you are free to do that and to exercise that unique experience of getting engaged in the system is also exciting.
Andrew, let me just add one thing to that.
Yes, go ahead.
The state of Arkansas has to balance our budget. I work as economic advisor for the governor, and we have to balance our budget. We cannot set a budget that's going to be greater than the revenues we expect. The federal government is totally different. They've got the Federal Reserve System who finances them. And we've got a $34 trillion debt now at the federal level. It's really, really big, and it's growing larger. Well, that enables a federal government to spend money on things without having to count the cost. Okay, we want to spend another $10 billion over here. Well, let's just do it. The Federal Reserve System will give us the money and we'll go forward and we'll just sell some bonds. State governments have to be a lot more responsible.
Now, when we look at responsibility from a state level to a federal level, at what point when, let's say, for example, the state level decide that we're going to spend, let's say, $1 billion on repairing roads, right? At what point during that decision does this impact? We know that down the road it will. At what point does the individual citizen can say, whoa, we disagree to that? And to what extent does that disagreement affect the decision of that bill and or decision coming forward? In other words, what power does the individual citizen have? Because if they do have that freedom, how much of that freedom can they express to either halt or change the decision that's been made ahead of them or above them?
Well, that's really a great example because we had a number of years ago, in fact, it was back during the Huckabee administration where Beth was working for them, the interstate system here got in really bad shape. And the federal government wasn't providing the repair funds. So we passed a bill that was on the general election to authorize, it was quite a large, about $700 million to rebuild the interstate system here. And that was done by the people. But they had to get out and sell it to them. So I and others went out and we sold it statewide, and it was passed by a large margin. So that's a direct issue of where the people had an impact on the financing of state government in Arkansas.
Absolutely agree with you on that, Dr. Rankin. In my experience, just being president of the International Student Association, I remember how we got involved. One of the things that I'm kind of proud of, really, is that when we look at the road right around, I think it was, I don't remember the exact road, Magnolia Road that goes on to 82. We looked at that and we said, what can we do about it? And then we started the highway cleaning. It wasn't a policy, it was an activity that we do. So it's like we go out and we clean up the highway, and then the state gave us the garbage bag, they assisted us and so forth. And that's one of the things that we started doing, the highway cleaning activity. We do that on the weekend, and it was another way to get the international students to say, hey, listen, you're here in America, you're here in Arkansas, you're here at this great university, so what can you really do? And it's about coming together. That builds unity. We came out and we cleaned the highways, and it was just a way of getting involved. And the purpose for saying that is that individuals who are watching right now, I don't want you to sit back and think, oh yeah, well, they're making that decision up ahead, and I'm too minute of an individual that my voice doesn't get heard. I want you to know that you have the power, you have a freedom to say something, to do something, and not just sit there and make decisions being made for you at the higher level. You are part of the big puzzle. You are part of the big picture. And I want to encourage you to run out there and get a copy of the economics, or the freedom of economics, so you can understand that there's some freedoms that you have. Get the copy of that book.
One of these.
Yes. And I'm thankful. And you know, I would love to get it signed too, because what I want to do like a special and just kind of talk about. I want you guys to come back on again, because there's some nuggets that I really got to dig into to kind of expose and get people to understand that there's more to this capitalism. There's more to this economics. It's about your awareness of the world that you're living in, Dr. Rankin.
All right. And I'll tell you, this book is available from rankineconomics.com.
Yes.
So you can get it. If you want a signed copy, they can do rankineconomics.com, and they also do Amazon. But my objective here is not to sell books. It's to get people to understand how important freedom is and how important capitalism is, because it's the economic system that raises people out of poverty and creates wealth. And it's so important that we protect it, Andrew.
Absolutely agree. So listen, remember, I want you to run, skip, hop, jump, fly, whatever you got to do. Get out there and get the book. Get the book. And it's not just about getting another book. You're getting access to resources. It's like you sitting down and having that conversation with Dr. Beth-Ann Rankin and Dr. David Rankin. It's almost like you're sitting there having access, talking to them, asking them any question you want to ask them. Get a copy of the book and get some information and get some knowledge so you can make informed decision. And one of the number one things that I'm taking away from this interview really is understanding that you have rights. And if you don't stand up for your rights, then you will give away your rights to say and to take part. So Beth-Ann, what I want to do right now is I want to give you an opportunity for you to kind of share, how does your role in economics as a female, okay, how do you inspire other females who say, well, I want to get into this policy stuff, this economic stuff, but I'm not sure where my place is? How do you motivate and inspire women in general to become active role models in economics?
Well, I will say I was incredibly fortunate to be the daughter of David and Toni Rankin, because they together are just possibility thinkers. They took the freedoms that we've been given in this country very seriously and embedded that in us as kids. And so I've really grown up under an umbrella of that anything was really possible. Anything was. Now, you had to work hard. You had, whether that was studying or practicing or applying yourself or putting in a few extra hours at times when you might be tired or you might be worn out, but to kind of stretch yourself and challenge yourself. But that if you worked hard, that the possibilities and the open doors were there. You know, I think about how grateful I am to live in a country where we do have K-12 education completely provided for and funded and free to every American child in this country. that you have and because of that, you have all the opportunities that come through our American education system, whether it's athletics or the arts or the performing arts, depending on what your skill set is. But hopefully just getting that message to all people, and you spoke to women as well, to just say, you know what, this is possible. So be a possibility thinker. Don't let the freedoms that we have in this country just go by you. Reach out there and grab those opportunities and apply yourself and make something of it. And you know what? Learn from failure. That's another thing I've learned as a consultant, even with whether I'm working with a nonprofit organization on strategic planning or leadership coaching or program evaluation or organizational design. Look at failure through the eyes of a field of study they call improvement science, which it cannot improve through this failure. Then it wasn't really failure. It was, I still learned something through this process. Then you can learn from that failure and go on to your next freedom. Take advantage of that next door that's open to you and what you learn from it. So I think to learn and really embrace that failure is not fatal. And I would rather live with a life of there's some failed attempts in there than a life of regrets that you never took advantage of the opportunities that were out there. So that's what I would say, is be a possibility thinker and take advantage of the freedoms.
Ladies, you hear that here first. You hear that here first. I'm listening. I'm ready with Dr. Beth-Ann Rankins. Want to encourage our females to go out there and just take the bull by the horn and take charge. It's a freedom that you have. We know many, 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 many years ago that wasn't so, right? But you now have that ability to think of possibility. Now, Beth, I got a question. Even growing up in a household, with a smart individual, Dr. David Rankins, like, what would be some of the challenge, as growing up in a house with such a smart individual that's impacting the world? Now an author, the president, you live with the president. Come on now. Like what is that like to live with the president?
Well, I will tell you, both of my parents really put family as a huge priority, and gratitude for the blessings that God has given us, that our country has given us, that freedom has given us. And just, we know we don't deserve it. We know that we're blessed to have it and we're grateful to have it. But I will tell you, at our house, family supper time was a really important, I would say, Dad, about an hour each evening, we would gather around the supper table as a family, and all of life stopped. We would come together as a family, and we would just it wasn't anything planned or contrived. We just talked issues, because these are issues were on Dad's mind. My parents were both involved in community service and different activities and freedom. And that was just a part of our growing up. So we did cut our teeth on these topics, so to speak, even as kids. Mm-hmm. And we then hopefully have carried that on into our adult life, especially just a spirit of gratitude, that of how can we really embrace the freedoms that are given to us and make life as special as possible.
Now, Dr. Rankin, there's a question coming for you too, right? Because now I'm a father, right? So I am. It's almost like I am living in some of your footsteps. So I got to see you in action as a president, and then here I am responsible for many of the international students who come to me because they either need a job, they need to apply for scholarships. So I was having meetings, and then I would come and sit with you. It was simply amazing. I said, let me go talk to the president about this. And they would come say, Andrew, how do I get so and so and so? I said, I need to check the higher ups. And then I'll set a meeting, and then got a chance to sit with you and tell you some of the challenges that we were experiencing. And I say that because, to kind of go back to a question that was asked, leadership is one of the things that you talked about, highlight in, your bio. You said, what policy enhances our world leadership position? And you also asked here the question, how can we strengthen individual freedom through economic policy? The other question, which I think was key, was, what can we do to protect power, pleasure, and benefits of freedom? I said that because I wanted to ask you this question. As a father, as a leader, as a community leader and activist, how do you model that sense of responsibility all in one while wearing all these many hats, right, in the home for your children?
Well, I think it's really important to be, first of all, you have to have order in the household.
Yeah.
The rule of law, and I've written several articles on this, the rule of law is key to a family. It's also key to a nation. It's key to a state. Things must be orderly. And we have seen across the country and across the world where you have disorder, wherever you have disorder, you lose your economic growth, you lose your economic activity. And so we had to establish order, and you had to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am to mom and dad, and things had to be in order. But we also were transparent with our children, and we wanted to be sure we raised them on the proper principles. You know, the Ten Commandments is a great list of ways to behave and ways to act. And we said, we want you to be like this. We want you to be fair. We want you to be honest. We want you to be ethical and tell the truth. Because I know in society today, it seems like the truth is really pushed way down, and we talk about spin like we authorize people not to tell the truth. Just spin it whatever is in your best advantage, and the truth is always best. So those principles we really tried to apply to our children, and we're just blessed that they all really turned out well.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Rankin. And I know all of our viewers are asking now, and they're wondering, I'm sure they're going to put it in the chat later on, like what would be like a challenge for individual that's a president of a university, individual that's now an author, an individual that's a thought leader, an individual that's a go-to for solutions because of either economic problems or just societal stress and or challenges, right? What is a challenge that you face that I know others are facing too, that you can give a tip on? Here is one thing that you can do. You gave some information on the family aspect. Is there a challenge that Dr. Rankin faces that many people would wonder, how does he deal with that?
Well, I think the key to me is, how do you get this information out? I just feel very strongly that we need to remember the people who put this Constitution together, how
Right.
important it is, and how important freedom is. And it is, you got to stick to your basic principles. You know, in leadership, Andrew, if you move away from your basic principles, you're in trouble. I've seen a lot of organizations, I won't name them, but they started off strong, they've done well, and now they're moving away from their basic principles, and they've suffered as a result in membership and revenue and all of those things. So stick to the principles, and that's my challenge, is to encourage people to stick to the principles of the Constitution that has helped make this country great.
Absolutely love it. Ladies and gentlemen, hey, listen to me. If you're a leader, I don't care if you're president, I don't care what you do, Dr. David Rankin is saying to you, and I say the same thing. If you don't have the principles that guides a foundation, it doesn't matter what you're trying to build, it's not going to move up. If you have the right foundation, in other words, you can build a skyscraper, you can build a duplex, you can build whatever you want on it. So I want to encourage you today, make sure that you have the right principles in your corner and beneath you so you can build and stand on a solid foundation. Dr. Rankin, I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to reconnect with me, a fellow mule rider. I'm excited just to come back down and to visit. I'm looking forward to reconnecting with the SAU family. Beth-Ann, it was swell to sit down and have conversation with you, talk to you and your pops. It was just amazing. So from all the crew back here, they're sitting there listening right now. From the ILIRPODCAST, I just want to say we're listening and we are ready. And I want to encourage everyone to get out there and get a copy of The Economics of Freedom by Dr. David F. Rankin and Dr. Beth-Ann Rankin Baker. It is a book that is going to help you to understand your personal rights and how you can use these personal rights to become the individual that you want to be, whether from your family, from a society, community, state, and even from a federal perspective. Any takeaways that you guys wanted to add before we get out of here?
Well, I would just say, remember the principles of capitalism and how great they are. And socialism is a distant, distant, distant second. All
right, Beth-Ann, what do you got?
Well, I just want to say thank you again, Andrew, for having us on this show. And just how proud we are of you and your team and your family and all that you have accomplished. And truly, come back and visit us here in Mule Rider Country. We'd love to see you anytime. Like I said, that welcome mat is always out for you, Andrew. We'd love to have you back on campus.
It's great to be with you. I'd encourage anyone to listen. You have been a great friend over the years, great leader down here at Southern Arkansas University. And congratulations on your program. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
I have to say what a pleasure it has been to reconnect with one of our most celebrated personalities and leaders at Southern Arkansas University in Magnolia. Andrew, thank you for having us on this show. It has been a privilege to visit with you again and to get to know all of your many listeners out there who in each and of their own way are changing the world for the better. So it's been great to be on this show. Keep up the great work, and thanks for all you do.
Until next time, keep listening, live ready, talk soon.